didn't really know that much about what we should do or what we shouldn't be doing to help orphans. But you've got to step out and you've got to begin. And God will show you what He has for you to do.
Welcome to this week's edition of First Person. I'm Wayne Shepherd, and in a few moments you'll hear more from our guest, Scott Nordstrom, who through grief following the death of his child was called by God to a ministry to orphans. Each week our goal is to bring you a guest who is gifted by God with a unique calling and perspective. We've been on the air now for several years with these weekly conversations, and they can all be heard online as a podcast through our website, firstpersoninterview.com, or on iTunes. And now another convenient way to listen or download any program is with our free smartphone app. Just search for First Person Interview in your app store. Plus additional information on our Facebook page, facebook.com/firstpersoninterview. When Scott Nordstrom and his wife suffered the loss of a child after only 14 days of her life, God placed a burden on their hearts to help orphans. Their call was simply to follow God's direction, and as a family, they were obedient to step out and go. As I talked with Scott recently, he told me the story of God at work in his family.
Well, I think, Wayne, that our story really begins in 2005. My wife and I were blessed with our fourth child, Faith Anastasia. And for whatever reason that's not really been, I guess, disclosed to us today by the father, she was only with us for just over 2 weeks. So through this process, it was more, it wasn't so much walking out our grief, but rather just through this process, seeking out the Father in terms of, how we should handle not only the pregnancy, but her birth and all of the complications that went along with that. God really just disclosed to us that He wanted us to serve orphan children.
And what were you doing up until this time?
Well, and I do that today. I have a job. I work as a volunteer. It just kind of depends on the week and the month how much time that I spend directly in the ministry. I was really blessed at the time where when we got things started, I was self-employed, and that has certainly some disadvantages, but I was really in charge of my own schedule. So it really allowed me to travel overseas, spend time in the ministry. I've been back in what you might call corporate America since the beginning of 2014. So that, I've had to alter my schedule a bit, but certainly the calling has not changed for me. And it was real obvious back in 2005, again, going through this experience with our daughter Faith, that God had called us. My wife and I were really not what you would expect in terms of likely candidates for this, but I believe that God's picked us out. And not only did He want to use us somehow, some way to glorify Him, but to care for His children, and that He knew that He would be glorified, because we certainly don't deserve any credit.
It must have been a radical turning point, though, for you when Faith Anastasia passed, to just have that much change come to your life. Talk more about the calling. What was it like? What did it look like? What did it sound like in your life?
My wife still wanted and felt that our family was called to a fourth child. So I would say 60 to 90 days after our daughter's funeral, we went to an informational meeting for adoption. It's difficult to explain how I felt. I mean, it's like I can go back there, in my mind right now, and it was so emotional. And I was certainly in that process of seeing those pictures of the kids. I was certainly reminded of my own grief, certainly, but I was grieved by all of these children without a mom or a dad. Mm. And, some of us don't come from great households. I mean, I love my mom and dad and certainly want to honor them and all that I do, but, I think they probably could have been better parents. I'm sure I could be a better parent, but these children have no parents. I mean, they don't have an advocate, and my heart was broken for those children that day, and my wife wondered what was wrong with me because I'm not a crier, but I just cried most of the way home driving, and she was a little concerned for our safety, but she was really, I guess, puzzled by my reaction to everything, and I shared with her my heart, and I felt that God was calling us to serve orphans in some way. We didn't know how, and we prayed that evening, and we asked God to show us or confirm for us that this is something that He wanted us to do, and strangely enough, that night, I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning just like normal, and my wife asked me about the dream I had. And I was a little puzzled because I didn't recall a dream. And she opened her nightstand and she got out her journal and she said, "Well, you talked in your sleep." And I wrote it down.
Oh, goodness.
And so I said twice, I said, "I'm going to take the girls to a place of comfort and safety." And at the time we were considering China, and China, their orphan population is primarily girls. And so I was just confident. I was overwhelmed in my soul that this is what God was telling me, that in fact He did want me to step out and serve orphan children. So that's what we did.
But where do you start? I mean, you don't have an organization. You're not networked, are you?
No, I didn't know anybody in missions or in the field. I guess it was kind of interesting. It was late summer. I can recall we went to a friend of the family's funeral, and on the way home, we were talking about where to go for Christmas, and this had been a conversation in our house for about 30 days. Christmas was coming, and this was to be baby's first Christmas. So we had decided with our other children that we did not want to be at home, and we had talked about going to spirit-filled places like Las Vegas, Hollywood, Walt Disney World, and last but not least, Washington, D.C. And so we ended up in an orphanage that Christmas in Juarez, Mexico. And I had called the church that we were attending, Southeast Christian Church in Parker, Colorado. And I had somehow gained some exposure at church that we were doing some work with a ministry located in El Paso that was working in Juarez. So I simply called them and said, "Hey, I believe I'm being called to help orphans. Are you familiar with an orphanage in Juarez that maybe where we could serve?" That's how we did it. I mean, I made contact with an orphanage down in Juarez. We coordinated dates and what we could bring and what we shouldn't bring and how we would get across the border and whatnot. Kind of a funny story that goes along with that. So we didn't know how we were going to get all the stuff down there. I mean, it's kind of logistically, 20 children is the number of children we blessed for Christmas. But we took some supplies, we took some gifts, and it was kind of a lot of things to bring with us, and we didn't feel that our van would be adequate. And through a pastor I knew in the community, I met a man that I'd never met before. It was the day before we were scheduled to leave. And he gave me the keys to a Suburban and said, "God bless you, be safe, and just let me know when you get back."
Take it to Mexico.
I drove his Suburban full of things for the children to Mexico, and it was amazing just how God has put so many things in order. And it's not just that trip, it's so many other things.
Well, I want you to tell more of these stories, but I'm already getting the impression that it was just one small act of obedience at a time. Is that the way you would characterize it?
I would. I mean, it is when God calls you to something. We've got this incredible thing called free choice. And certainly, God would have loved us no differently had we decided not to step out. But we did, and there's so many things that we would have missed not being part of the story. And so, after going to Juarez in Christmas 2005, I turned around and 60 days later went to Zambia. I honestly couldn't tell you. I'm a little embarrassed, I guess, by it now, but I couldn't have told you where Zambia was before I thought about going there. Mm-hmm. And called a friend of mine in Fort Myers, Florida, and said, "I'm going to Zambia to serve orphans. What do you think about coming with me?" And he asked me where that was. I said, "It's in sub-Saharan Africa." And he said, "You can count on me." Wow. So Rick V. Hill and I went off to Zambia for the first time. and didn't really know that much about what we should do or what we shouldn't be doing to help orphans. But it just, you've got to step out and you've got to begin. And God will show you what He has for you to do. And that's what He's done every step of the way.
We'll learn more of Scott Nordstrom's story about ministry to orphans coming up in the second half of First Person. This weekly program is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company. Together, we are committed to telling the stories of Christ at work in the nations of the world. FEBC broadcasts the gospel in nearly 50 of those countries, reaching people in over 100 languages, introducing them to God's love and discipling them through God's Word. To learn more about FEBC and its broadcasts, please visit firstpersoninterview.com and click the banner FEBC. That's firstpersoninterview.com. My first person guest today is Scott Nordstrom. Scott is the founder of Global Orphan Relief. It's an amazing story, and a story of a turning point in his life, a story of God calling him to this ministry, and I find it quite remarkable. And Scott, I want to hear more about the organization, but I want to hear more about your journey towards establishing Global Orphan Relief as well. So far you've been to Mexico and Zambia in those early days. What's happened and how long ago was that?
Well, we started in 2005, went to Mexico for my first trip in December of that year, and then followed up with a trip to Zambia in February of 2006. And then it just snowballed from there. I've been to Zambia 10 times since 2006. Today we are serving just shy of 700 children on a monthly basis.
Now, in Zambia, are any of those children from Angola? And I know there's refugee camps in Zambia. What else is going on there?
Well, Zambia is just more than anything an impoverished country. But they've been independent since 1964, and for the most part at peace. And so you just have about 10% of the population, 1.3 million orphan children in Zambia. So we have stepped in several ways today. We've got a couple orphanages that we've developed, House of Faith and House of Hope, in the southern province of Zambia. You've
started these orphanages from scratch?
Yes, we did. I traveled to Zambia for my second trip in January of 2007, and that is when we met our partners, Mike and Linda Jones of Noah Ministries. And they really oversee our day-to-day activity in Zambia, and it's been a blessing. I mean, for an infant movement like Global Orphan Relief, especially at that time, we really needed some extra hand-holding. Doing this type of work so far away in a different culture is complicated. It's not like it just comes second nature. Mm-hmm. So we were really blessed to have them help us. But yes, we started House of Faith in that year, 2007, and received our first child in March of 2008. We then followed up with a House of Hope, also in the southern province of Zambia, and we received our first child there in 2013. So
and how many children now in those orphanages in Zambia?
Today we have about 60 children there, but all told, we serve about 160 children in Zambia. We're also doing some extended care, or what you might refer to as foster care, where the child stays with the extended family but just needs some assistance in some way. Rather than taking that child out of the home, we're working with that extended family to care for the child where they are. In addition, we're doing some education programs where we're going into schools where orphans exist. So all told, today in Zambia, we're serving 160 children.
Now, for many people, starting out the way you started out from zero, to do what you're doing in Zambia would have been enough, but you haven't stopped there. Why?
There's so many children that need help. I mean, certainly, worldwide, there's a huge need for child advocacy, especially as it pertains to orphan children. And so we came together as a board. We came together in 2014 and but agreed with what the Father was calling us to do, to build capacity to serve 1,440 orphans on a monthly basis. We were somewhere around 80 orphans at that time in 2 countries, Zambia and Pakistan. And today we're serving just shy of 700 children in 5 countries. And
wait a minute, where did Pakistan come into the picture?
Well, Pakistan I've not traveled personally to Pakistan, though we have had an opportunity to, verify the work that is going on there. But we started working with Pastor Salim in the Punjab province, I believe that's how it's pronounced. And, he needed help. He had a home for orphans, but did not have the resources to host the children there. And so we stepped in with him to partner to serve these children. And as you might expect in a place like Pakistan, ultra complicated to do work there. Also dangerous in some respects. So certainly we're not deploying teams to Pakistan, but we are serving children there and have done so since January 2011.
What are the other countries now that you're involved with?
We are, as of I believe it was, I'm going from memory here, the fall of 2014, we started serving in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. I've had the pleasure of traveling there in the past, and it is adjacent to Zambia. And then we are also serving in South Sudan, which is the newest country in the world, and really over the last 5 years has experienced on and off civil war as different factions have vied for power there. And then lastly, Kenya. We started serving in Kenya just last month.
I'm astounded. Again, this is only a few years old, and yet God has given that increase, and you're helping all these children in so many places. You must look back on this and kind of scratch your head. I mean, you have to give glory to God for all that.
Oh, definitely. It's been an honor and a privilege to have a front row seat and watch how the Father has stepped in on the behalf of His children. I mean, He loves His little children, and it's been incredible. As you might expect, Wayne, I could tell you story after story. Certainly, there's some information on our website at www.globalorphanrelief.org that folks can check out. But it is an awesome thing. It is an honor and a privilege. And I believe that some way, somehow, that God is only just beginning to serve His children through Global Orphan Relief.
So you have a vision for more.
Well, certainly, right now, today, we have been instructed by the Father to build capacity to serve 1,440 children. I don't know that God will stop there. Certainly, that's up to Him. We do have a ways to go. That's more than double the amount of children we're serving today. We are an all-volunteer organization. We do have a contract marketing and communications person that does work with us.
And you are an established 501c3, correct?
We are. We received our, I guess it's the certification or early 2006.
Well, what impact has this had on your family, Scott?
It's had a pretty incredible impact, I would say. Now, my wife has not had an opportunity to travel to Zambia as of yet, but 2 of my 3 children have. My son Noah, he's been with me to Zambia 3 times, and then my oldest child, Sydney, she has been to Zambia once with me, and it's been interesting to see how they step into God's story. Not that they're not in that story here, but there's so many distractions that's removed. So we are stepping maybe a little closer to heaven when we put ourselves in that vulnerable position. It's been a blessing for them. Certainly, I would say in many instances, life-changing as they have seen how these children struggle just for the basic needs. They've been blessed through this process as well.
In the orphanages, can I assume that education is a big part of it, and of course, introducing them to Jesus is part of what goes on? It is.
What's kind of different about Global Orphan Relief is we want to the best of our abilities, we want to keep the children where they are. We don't want to relocate them. We don't want to sever family ties. So, unfortunately for us, one size does not fit all. We're not getting donations for shoes and then getting, a sponsor to provide shoes. I mean, we don't have something that is very simple to communicate to donors because we are serving children in very different ways in each location. In Zambia, for instance, we've got a couple different programs. We've got the extended care, the orphanage, the education. So Zambia is a little unique in that we're doing all those things. In South Sudan, we're simply feeding children and providing after-school Bible studies for them. In the DRC, we've got the Dream School. It's a Christian school where the orphans can come and their fees are covered and they're hearing about Jesus. In Pakistan, the children are getting everything right there at the orphanage, their education, their care. So it just really kind of varies by location to location how these children are being served. But certainly one commonality with all of the programs is that they are being taught the Word of God, and we feel that that's very important for these children.
Scott, can you imagine what life would have been like if you had not followed God's leading?
No, I don't. It's funny. I don't think about that much. I don't, good or bad, I don't necessarily take great solace in what we've accomplished either, just knowing how many more children are out there that need our help. And so, I just feel compelled to push forward and continue to be obedient to what God has called me to do. And, sure, I'm just like anyone at times. Maybe I run into some difficulties or some personal circumstance that's not ideal for me, and I wonder why maybe the Father's not cutting me a break because I'm doing all these other things. But I'm not sure that's how that works, And so God is just teaching me through these various experiences that I have, and certainly Global Orphan Relief is one aspect of that. But, it was never a question for me as to whether or not I would be obedient to His calling. It was more, how am I going to do this? God, show me the way. God, lay out the opportunities. Open the doors where you would have us serve. And certainly, bring the right people into to my sphere of influence that can come alongside this important adventure and being part of God's story. So it's all very cool stuff.
Our first-person guest today, Scott Nordstrom. His ministry is called Global Orphan Relief, and we'll have additional information and links on our website, firstpersoninterview.com. As we close today, let me take a moment to thank the Far East Broadcasting Company for helping us provide these weekly interviews. FEBC's mission is to take Christ to the world by radio, and we do that in nearly 50 countries as we proclaim the gospel, always in the local language. I'm deeply committed to the ministry of FEBC, and I hope that we're able to shed a little light on what God is doing through these dedicated broadcasters around the world. Take some time to learn what you can do through prayer and support to help FEBC by visiting firstpersoninterview.com and clicking on the banner for the Far East Broadcasting Company. And then I hope you'll plan to join us each week at this time. In the meantime, use our free app to listen anytime to this or past interviews, which you can download for your listening convenience. It's available for both Apple and Android devices. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next week for First Person.